We just finished our discussion of thermal energy, how when you give an object thermal energy, it changes phase from a solid, which has the lowest amount of energy. We can give it energy and it melts into a liquid. From a liquid, we can give it energy, it vaporizes into a gas, and so on and so forth. But today we're going to talk a little bit about exceptions to the rule. So here I'm asking you to compare two things, rock and Play-Doh. You've seen these things before. You know some things about them. A rock is very hard. It keeps its shape. It has a definite shape, definite volume. How would you categorize Play-Doh? Does it have a definite volume? Sure. Does it have a definite shape? Not quite. But is it a liquid? How would we classify things that just don't quite fit? So we're going to look at some properties of solids and some things that are kind of solids and see how we can classify them and describe them. So in some conditions, that line between solid and liquid is not very easily distinguished. Most of the time, if you ask somebody what a solid is, they could tell you and describe a brick or describe a chair. And if you ask somebody about a liquid, you can talk about cooking oil or rubbing alcohol. And so you have definite properties that definitely fall into those categories. The division between solid and liquid usually has to do with temperature. As you lower the temperature, your particles slow down. Those cohesive forces can hold tightly to your particles. They can't slide around much anymore, and so they end up frozen in a fixed pattern. Now, that fixed pattern could be what we call a crystal lattice. These are some examples of crystal lattices. If you've ever seen rocks like pyrite or quartz, you know that when you find them, they appear in a definite, predictable shape. For instance, pyrite is always in this cubic form. They always are in little tiny squares. Quartz, which is silicon dioxide, is always in this hexagonal shape, unless it's been broken, right? So they naturally grow with 6 sides to them. And the reason for this crystal lattice shape is the molecules. The molecules here are represented by the blue spheres, and then in between those white sticks there are representing the molecules, the bonds between the molecules. So since your silicon dioxide, your silicon and 2 oxygens, since they always appear in that kind of triangle shape, then they're always going to grow bigger and bigger in that same shape, in that hexagonal, predictable pattern. Your pyrite, your iron, sulfur, Fe(S)2. Your iron and sulfur are going to always join together in a predictable pattern, which will create those little cubes. The more molecules you add, just the bigger and bigger those cubes and those hexagonal crystals get, but they're still the same shape. Then you have things that aren't in a predictable pattern. Inside that crystal lattice, your particles keep moving, but in some solids, they're not really fixed. They move around as much as they want to. So they have a definite volume, they have a definite shape, but that shape is not a fixed, predictable pattern. So on the right here, this predictable fixed pattern is that silicon dioxide. You see the hexagonal quartz shape. So quartz, if left to grow naturally, has the predictable hexagonal shape. On the left, you see silicon and oxygen, but they're not in a predictable pattern. Left is glass. So glass is silicon dioxide. It's quartz that has been crushed or melted down, usually sand they've crushed and melted down. And then it froze, it stopped in its tracks too fast to link up into those patterns. So it just kind of froze in place. And so glass is an amorphous solid, and it actually does flow through time. If you've ever seen really old houses or buildings with really old glass windows, you might notice a waviness to them. That waviness is not because they were bad at pouring glass 100 years ago, but because during time that glass has very, very slowly creeped into a different shape. You see the picture of butter up here. Butter has a definite shape, definite volume. It's a solid, but you can easily stick your finger in it, kind of like the Play-Doh, and change its shape. That's because you don't have a set crystal pattern of butter. It's just kind of frozen in place. So if your phase is all a big spectrum from solid to liquid to gas, amorphous solids would be closer to your solids. Non-Newtonian fluids will be in between your solid and liquid, but closer to the liquid. So I want you to stop and watch this video. I'm going to link it up here. Watch this, and then we'll come back together and keep talking. All right, so we're talking solids, we're talking fluids. Let's go back to solids for a minute and look at some properties of solids and how they get those properties. So one is elasticity. Will it return to its original form after it's been deformed? So think a rubber band, think a spring. We talk about elastic potential energy. If it has elasticity, then it will snap back to its original shape. Malleability is the ability to be stretched into thin sheets. So you can take it, you can compress it, you can flatten it out into long sheets. So think about the gold that we make money from, the copper, the tin, aluminum. We can take those and flatten them out into long, thin sheets. Not everything will do that. Some things, whenever you try to flatten them and compress them, they just shatter. They can't be put into those thin sheets. And then ductility is similar to elasticity and malleability, but this is the ability to be pulled into wires. So here we have a roll of copper wire. Copper is very ductile, meaning that you can take those elements and pull them and stretch them, and they will stay together. They won't snap like this Play-Doh will do. They won't snap, but they'll actually pull out into long, thin wires. And that makes them very useful for, in this case, electricity, conducting electricity. So sometimes those lines between what's a solid, what's a liquid, what's a gas, they become really, really fuzzy. So here's another one where I want you to go and watch this video and then come back and we'll chat about it. All right, so you saw the effect of temperature on what was in the container, and you saw pressure and whatnot. So when temperature changes, the molecules, if they're adding energy, they get more energetic, more excited, and move around more. If they're colder, then they'll contract and get closer together. So thermal expansion is a property of a solid when they get heated and they expand or cool and contract. And it's just because of the amount of energy that they have pushing them away from each other. Now, this is useful to remember when you're building things or when you're constructing things, because in solids, either the volume increases or sometimes the length. If you're talking about ductile metals, that length will increase when the kinetic energy or the thermal energy of those particles increases. So they move away from each other. This is a picture of train tracks that have buckled. It got too hot and the track tried to expand. It didn't have any room to expand into because track is all one big unit, and so it had to go somewhere and it buckled. Your bridges and sidewalks, let me go back. Your bridges and sidewalks have those little cracks in between them, or bridges will have like joints in between them, so that when your bridges and your sidewalks expand and contract, they won't cause the sidewalk or the bridge to buckle. They have a place to go to expand and contract into. So that's the reason for those cracks in our sidewalks. Now, if solids do that a noticeable amount, liquids definitely do it. Liquids expand and contract in the same way. The whole liquid expands, and gases do it even more than liquids do. So because they're already so far apart, any thermal expansion just exacerbates that division, that change there. So liquids expand and contract even more, and gases even more so. So we've seen this picture before. This was in our thermal energy unit. Here's a set of balloons that it got very cold snap came through, and the balloons contracted, leaving behind that ice that had fallen on top of them. So it's important to remember all your materials are going to expand and contract at different rates, even among solids and even among liquids. They're going to expand and contract differently. Copper wood different from aluminum, different from concrete, different from steel. So as an engineer, they have to look at what those materials are that they're using and think about the rate of thermal expansion. Otherwise, if you have like a steel beam inside of a skyscraper with concrete on the outside, the steel expands and contracts more than the concrete. You can crack your concrete and break your building apart. So they have to really think about the materials that they're using and try to pick things that have similar rates of expansion and contraction, so they do that together. On a more like personal note, if you've ever gotten a filling dentists have to pick an enamel that goes in a filling that expands and contracts at the same rate as a tooth material. Otherwise, if you drink something cold or eat something hot, your tooth does thermally expand and contract with the temperature change. And if your enamel inside that filling is expanding and contracting at a different rate, then it'll pop that filling out. It'll break the tooth. So lots of applications for thinking about that expansion. So here's those, I knew that was coming. Here's those sidewalks and bridges that we were talking about with the expansion joints to allow for that thermal expansion there. The idea of thermal expansion can actually be useful. This is a thermostat, and it's kind of an old-timey one, but they all work very similar ways. Inside the thermostat, if you ever pop the top off, you'll see this coil of metal. And this coil of metal is actually two metals back to back, and they have different rates of thermal expansion. So in this case, your brass is going to expand faster, expand more than the steel will, which, since they're side by side, will cause it to bend. So here you've got your thermostat on. It is heating up your home, and then once it has heated, then that brass will expand, and when it expands, it'll push that strip backwards and turn the thermostat off. That's how it knows to turn on and off with the temperature. It has to do with that rate of thermal expansion. Now, today, yours are a little bit more digital than that, but these are the old-timey thermostats and how they used to work. So here's a video on thermal expansion and contraction. It's really cute. Watch that real quick, and then you can come back. All right, so of course there's always exceptions. We talked about Play-Doh being an exception to the solid liquid, and the putty that we talked about, those non-Newtonian fluids being exceptions. Well, turns out water is even a strange exception, and it's a good thing that it is. It actually helps us out a lot. Usually when liquids freeze into solids, the particles get closer together and they get more dense, more tightly compacted. Water's an exception. You know, when water freezes, it floats. So when water freezes, it makes that crystal lattice structure that we talked about earlier. And that crystal lattice structure actually takes those little Mickey Mouse molecules of hydrogen and oxygen and arranges them so that they're in that pattern. And that pattern takes up more space than the water molecules themselves. So that crystalline shape spreads them out, makes them less dense, and your ice floats on the top of water. Otherwise, the polar ice caps would look very strange, right? So we talked about solids, liquids, and gases, but what would you say if I told you we were not done? There's more than solids, liquids, and gases. There is a fourth state of matter, and perhaps you have covered this before. You're probably already thinking of something right there. This isn't a science fiction movie. It's not something that Stephen Hawking created. It was around before him. It is the idea of plasma. So solid, if it heats, breaks apart into liquid as it's heated, the bonds will break into a gas. If you heat a gas, there becomes a point at which the gas is so energetic that the molecules that are zipping around start running into each other so fast and so violently that they rip each other apart. So you end up getting these negative electrons and these positive ions floating around separate of each other. So it's very, even though it sounds strange and it's nothing you've ever held in your hand, it's actually very common. Most of the matter in our universe is plasma. It's ionized particles that are out there. And if you look at the fluorescent lights above you, fluorescent lights work off of this concept. You've got a gas in a tube. When the electricity turns on, the electricity makes that gas so energetic, it ionizes and starts giving off energy in the form of light. So plasma can conduct electricity, gases cannot. Okay, those gases turn into plasma, and like the neon sign here, they're used in neon signs, fluorescent bulbs, and your sodium vapor lights. So one last video, and we will finish our look at our states of matter.